Hello, so I'm Miss Bloomfield, and at GCSE we do GCSE Religious Studies. So through year 7 and 8, you've done PD for personal development, but when you go on to GCSE, that turns into RS. So if you think about what we've done this term and what we did in the last 2 terms of year 7, that is sort of religious studies. So the exam board that we do is WJC and Educas, which is the Welsh board. And we do this because I find that it's the clearest way of answering questions. So it takes some of the sting out of learning question technique because we can get really clear on what you've got to do. There's more on that later. So why take RS? In RS, we answer the big questions. So we look at things like, is our life pre-planned and does it matter? Is there a gay gene? Should men and women be equal? Why does terrorism happen? When is a fetus a person? And is the death penalty acceptable? So we're asking the big questions. We do this because RE, I would say, is one of the most relevant GCSEs. So religion, even if in your life it's not particularly impactful on what you do, in the world it still is a big deal. So if we have a look at these headlines, this is all the times that religion has been in the news recently. Okay, if we start looking at the moral issues that we study at GCSE as well, then there's even more of that. So we have the human rights, the death penalty, euthanasia, we have homosexuality, and these things are still appearing in the news all the time as well. And what we do is we learn how to look at moral issues like these through a lens of our own opinion and that of religious opinion and that of non-religious opinion. So we look at some humanism and some atheism. Why take RS? So what do I need to take RS? So to take RS, you have to be tolerant. You're going to be learning about other people's opinions, cultures, and religions. So if you can't, if you struggle to be tolerant of other people's opinions, then RS is not for you. Okay? You have to be empathetic and understanding. So in order to win an argument, you have to first understand what the other person is saying. If you can't listen to other people, then again, RS is not for you. You have to be able to listen and properly understand what they're telling you in order to be able to critically examine their argument, to analyze it, and then to counter-argue. This is not saying that I want everybody to have the same opinion, because that would make life really boring. But in order to have a proper debate, you have to be able to listen to what people are saying and then counter it. You also have to have an interest in the world. Again, we're looking at relevant issues that are going on today. So if you catch on the news that there's a euthanasia case, or if your parents mention to you there's a human rights being debated in Parliament, or if you've seen something an MP's voted for, then bring it to lessons. We can use all of that, and it's all relevant in the exam as well. So, will I enjoy it? We do, at GCSE, we do 3 different papers. We do paper 1, which is about ethics. It's where we do relationships, life and death, good and evil, and human rights. Then we do paper 2, which is Christian beliefs and practices. And then we do paper 3, which is Islamic beliefs and practices. So you've had a taste of this in school. So when we've done, last year we looked at reincarnation with the Chipko movement. That's part of life and death. And then the unit that we did last year, where we looked at Jesus and God and the omni words, that was Christian beliefs. And what you're doing right now in year 8, that's Islamic beliefs. So Akira and the angels and the prophets, that's the sort of thing that we'll be doing. So as a brief overview, these are from the GCSE specs. So we look at the role of families and marriage and wedding ceremonies, and we look at sexual relationships. So we look at the use of contraception and same-sex relationships, and then we look at equality. So we look at, are men and women equal in society and in religion? Then we do life and death, where we look at where the world came from. So we compare and contrast religious views and scientific views, and we look at how compatible they are. Then we look at what impact this has, so why the way the world came to be today makes people want to look after it. And then we look at human life itself, so we look at when a person becomes a person. We look at abortion and euthanasia, so when a person stops being a person, if a person stops being a person. And then from that, we look at like the soul and the afterlife, again, in terms of religion and non-religious viewpoints. And then we look at the impact that these viewpoints have on graves and funerals. Because what we're trying to do is look at how a belief system or how something someone believes in impacts how they live their life. Then we do good and evil, which is my favourite unit, where we look at crime and punishment, so why people commit crimes, how we treat criminals, how we have prison chaplains and then reformers, which you look at in history. And then we look at the reasons why we have punishment. So is it to protect society? Is it to make the victim feel like they've gained retribution? And then from that, we look at forgiveness, and we look at good and evil and suffering. So we look at how evil is allowed to exist in the world. What if it's got a purpose? So this is a unit that we're going to be doing after Easter, like a little basic of it. Okay, and then human rights, where we look at the creation of human rights. We do some things on prejudice and discrimination, which is from the term before Christmas, when we looked at the Equalities Act. And then we look at how people have fought for these things. So we'll look at Martin Luther King, and we'll re-look at Malala, and we look at a priest called Oscar Romero, who was shot in front of his congregation for trying to encourage the poor people in El Salvador to stand up for their basic rights. Okay, and then we do Christian beliefs and practices, where we look at Jesus and God and the afterlife, and then we look at how this affects, again, how people live. So we look at prayer and pilgrimage and celebrations. And then we do the same thing with Islam, where we look at the nature of God and prophethood, and angels, not angels, and again, how this impacts how people live. So Islam is one of the biggest donors to charity, because it's written into part of their core practices that you give money yearly to charity. As I was saying, from the exam board, we do, for each one of these units, we do an A, a B, a C, and a D question. So the A is always a definition question, the B is always a description question, the C is always an explanation question, and the D is always a judgment question. So for D especially, this one, we are doing like A-level and university style essays. So you do have to be able to write down your ideas and be able to express your ideas on paper. So what you get is something like a quote saying, men and women should be equal in religion. And then you'd say on the one hand, and then you'd say on the other hand, and then you'd say which one you think is the strongest argument, which one do you think makes the most sense. And to be honest, it's not always your opinion. Sometimes you can see a valid argument, even if it's not something that you believe. And through the course, we look at philosophers who say this as well, who have ideas, but even though they don't live by them. Okay, so if you have any questions, drop me an email and I will do my best to respond. Thank you.